you. It's nice to be back. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Wait till I've spoken. It's nice to be back. I didn't want to miss coming and addressing conference, and I'm grateful for the invitation. Even though I'm no longer the chair of the group, I'm still a member of the Bakers Union Parliamentary group that we set up all those years ago. And I'm glad that Ian Mearns was here early in the week to give the parliamentary report, and also I think Richard Bergen, one of my Treasury team, will be up here tomorrow as well, just again in solidarity. I just want to say, after the last speaker, years ago in the early 80s, I was a member of the NUM. I was appointed in the head office. I was on the shop floor, went to university, and then went to get a job with a trade union. The NUM appointed me, and I was appointed by, some of you may remember the names. The General Secretary then was Lawrence Daly, the Vice President was Mick McGarhy, and I was amazed to get the job, and I was proud to be associated with the NUM, because they were the, I suppose, the Praetorian Guard of the trade union movement at the time. They were the ones who stood up for trade union rights. It's no wonder that Thatcher wanted to destroy them, because she thought if she could break the NUM, she'd be able to break the trade union movement and destroy the whole movement, really, in one fell sweep in a dispute. So all through that dispute, I have nothing but praise for the courage that was shown, not just by the NUM members themselves, but some of you remember the women's groups that were formed during that dispute to actually support their members, to support members of their family, but also right the way across the country, the whole movement rose up. So I give you this commitment, absolute commitment. When Labour goes back into government, there will be an inquiry into Orgreave, and we will bring to book those people who perpetrated that crime. And it wasn't just them. It wasn't just them, because in the last 10 years, as a union, we've been supporting the Blacklist support group that I set up all those years ago to expose what was happening to blacklisted workers, people who basically all they did was stand up for trade union rights, health and safety, negotiating on behalf of the members of their union. It was usually UCAT, Unite and others. And what then happened is that secretly, privately, an organisation called the Consulting Association set up a blacklist, and individual companies would phone the Consulting Association. This was how it worked. And when they were recruiting, they'd phone the Consulting Association, they'd check the 4,000 names on their computer, and if they were listed, those people would not be employed. Or even if they'd been employed by mistake, they'd be found some excuse to sack them. Now, a number of years ago, we set up the Blacklist Support Group. This union supported it, and I'm eternally grateful for that. And we exposed what was going on. We changed the legislation. And only this month, as you know, some of those blacklisted workers secured the compensation. But I tell you, that's not enough. It's not enough to be compensated. It's not enough. We want justice. And we've said there'll be no peace until there's justice. So when we go back into power, there will be a full public independent inquiry into the blacklisting of trade unions in this country. And we will expose what went on. Because it destroyed people's lives. This time last year, when I was up here, I was chair of the parliamentary group. I'd been on the back benches for 18 years. David Miliband, unfortunately, had resigned as leader. We were fairly despondent on that Friday after the election, when we lost the election itself. And at that point in time, to be frank, I was expecting the best that we could do on terms of the left and the trade unions within our movement was to try and, I don't know, swing behind some candidate that might offer us some way forward, some at least improvements, marginal improvements, and promises that when we go back into government there would be some, again, sort of marginal improvements. It was about negotiating. Maybe we could get someone on the left as a junior minister or something like that. But then there was a lot of pressure, and some of it came from this union, about we needed to stand a left candidate for the leadership of the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn and I convened a number of meetings, Ian and Ronnie were at those meetings, in which we were saying to people, there is no way, no chance we could get a left member of Parliament on the ballot paper, and there's no chance that we could win. Do not take racing tips from me. because we had 2 of those meetings. We got all the left organisations to do that, but the pressure was overwhelming. And to be frank, I think it's almost the wisdom of crowds. It's the wisdom of large numbers of people coming together. Ian, Ronnie, and a whole range of you are the same. We're saying, you've got to run a candidate. If only to put the arguments, you've got to run a candidate. So I chaired the Socialist Campaign Group, so we had a meeting in Parliament. Some of you know this story. We sat round and we went round the table and said, look, all right, let's run a candidate then. Even if we get hammered, let's run a candidate. So who's it going to be? And I said, well, I've done it twice, couldn't get on the ballot paper. So that's my level of popularity amongst the Parliamentary Labour Party. Then it was Diane Abbott said, I did it last time. And it was a reasonable result, but I don't want to do it again. And Jeremy Corbyn sat at the end of the table, so we turned to him and said, well, it's your turn. And he said, oh, go on then. Now, that's the sort of leader I want, you know. Someone you have to force to stand, not some careerist who's come into Parliament with the back of an envelope, MP at 25, Minister at 35, Prime Minister at 45. I want someone who you actually have to force to stand because they're not careerists, they're not personally ambitious, but they do it out of duty to the movement. And that's what Jeremy did. I set up a campaign team of volunteers. Some of you, well, many of you were involved in all of this from the beginning. And I said, look, what we'll do is we'll try and get you on the ballot paper. I'll go around. We need 35 nominations. So I went round MPs, begging them, pleading with them, yes, doing a few deals as well, offering to sleep with some of them, but that didn't work. And we got to the morning of the nominations, and at midday the nominations closed. And I'd done a deal with 5 of them that if we got to 33, and we needed 35, if we got to 34, one of them would nominate. 10 seconds before 12, the closed nominations, we got to 33, and I had 4 of them standing there, and I was begging them. And 2 of them broke ranks and nominated to get us over. Andrew Smith from Oxford and Gordon Marsden from Blackpool. And I'll be eternally grateful for them for that. And Jeremy got the 35 nominations he wanted. I had to go and find him because he'd gone for a cup of tea just to tell him he was the candidate. And what he then said, well, we'll set up a campaign team, we'll go around the country, we'll organise meetings all around the country. He said, look, come with me, John. I said, don't be ridiculous, it'll look like last of summer wine going on tour if we do it, you know. So what I did is I did the usual left thing. I said, let's book rooms all around the country, but don't book a room more than 100. And make sure the chairs are there so you can pull them away. If only 20 turn up, it looks packed anyway, that sort of thing. What happened, we booked our first meeting for 100 people, 500 turned up. Then we booked our next one for 500, 1,000 turned up. He did 100 meetings like that all around the country. It was phenomenal. And there's a great film in Camden, in Bidborough, the Bidborough Centre. Some of you might know it. We've used it for rallies before. Holds 2,000, and we had to get the FPU fire engine outside so Jeremy could address the people because the street was heaving. And there's a great film of 2 young people breaking into the hall, not breaking out. Wherever you've seen that before at a political meeting that we organise. Unbelievable. What happened at those meetings, I think, was phenomenal as well. Jeremy spoke and then listened. And then people came up with their concerns about the life that they were confronting, the changes that they wanted. We had people turning up saying basically in our area we can't afford a roof over our heads. We've got homelessness on a scale never seen before. I tell you, in my constituency it's the same. Tonight I'll have 200 families sleeping in bed and breakfast. I've got people sleeping in sheds and garages rented out to them. Got people sleeping in the parks, canal, you name it. It's just phenomenally appalling. We've never seen a housing crisis like this since the Second World War. And rents, landlords charging rents which are obscene, getting tax breaks for repairs that they never do and don't have to do just to receive that tax break. Buy-to-let landlords who are to be rapacious in the profits that they seek off families in desperate need. And people turned up and said, look, this is the problem. What's the solution? Well, the solution is straightforward, isn't it? The reason we've got a housing crisis is because we haven't built council houses for 30 years. So when we go back into government, We're going to build council houses again on their hundreds of thousands. So we put people back into work. But it just doesn't house people. It reduces the prices of properties as well because it reduces demand. But it puts builders back into work, UCAT members. It brings kids into the industry as well. We give them proper apprenticeships and training. That was the solution. We had others turn up, public sector workers, right the way across the piece, health workers, turning up, talking about the pressure that they were under as a result of privatisation and cuts and targets and all the other reforms, supposedly, that have been introduced over the last 7 years, and unfortunately, yes, under New Labour as well. And the solution in the health service is straightforward, isn't it? We end the privatisation of the NHS. And that's been where it's been privatised, we bring it back. And it's right the way across the piece. And we had people turn up like yourselves who are explaining exactly what it's like in industry at the moment. The sort of bosses that we've got, the exploitation that goes on, the wages that have been frozen for so long, the hours that are lengthening, the 0 hours contracts that are being introduced, and the overall insecurity that there is out there. And we know why the situation is like that. And it's been displayed to us, because it's ever since the miners' strike in the mid-1980s, government after government have taken away, undermined and broken trade union rights in this country. So we made an absolute commitment during the campaign, and we've repeated it right the way in the last few months as well. Because the Trade Union Act that has gone through is an existential threat to trade unions in this country. It's an attempt to break trade union rights in this country once and for all. So we said the reason that wages are so low is because trade union rights have been withdrawn. So when we go back into government, let me give you this absolute commitment. In the first 100 days of a Labour government, we will scrap the Trade Union Act once and for all. Now Jeremy appointed Ian Lavery, ex-miner, to run a consultation on Trade Unions 2020, which will be our reform programme to restore trade union rights in this country. The Institute of Employment Rights, Professor Ewing and also John Hendy, the QC, etc., and CAD, they're bringing forward a booklet in the next couple of weeks, and you'll see, as part of the submission to that consultation, you'll see set out the basic trade union rights that we need to restore in this country, just simply to take us up to the level of trade union rights that the International Labour Organization says should apply right the way across the world if we're to establish basic human rights in this country. And when we go back into government, that's exactly what we'll do. The consultation will take place. We'll take that then to Labour Party conference. We'll consolidate it as our party policy. We'll draft up the legislation, and it will be on the shelf for when we go back into government to restore trade union rights in this country. They're the issues that were coming up at all those meetings in the campaign. And what happened was that, well, about 3/4 of the way through the campaign, I had people out canvassing, telephone canvassing and all the rest. We even invented an app for the phone so people could canvass from their phone. And all the canvass returns were coming in saying Jeremy was getting about 60% support. And I didn't believe it. And I retrained some of our canvassers, and they came out and they said, no, it's about 60% support that he's getting. We went to the QE2 to read the results, to have the results announced. And below me, he got 59.5% of the votes, right the way across the piece. And do you know, what I was proud of is that he got that majority amongst Labour Party members, amongst trade union supporters and affiliates, and also the new supporters that had registered with their £3 donations, etc., right the way across the piece. And he did a brilliant speech on the morning. Some of you may have, it was short, but it was brilliant. Some of you may have seen it. And it was setting out the agenda of issues that we had to confront and the sort of policies and the direction that we were going in. The overwhelming point, I think, that he made for me was that we now had a Labour leader, it's exactly as the comrade said before, I never thought this would happen in my lifetime, a Labour leader who was proud to use the word socialist, proud to be a socialist again. Now, I was also proud of Jeremy because the first act, apart from thanking all the volunteers, etc., the first act he undertook was to go out into Parliament Square, and there was a demonstration, and it was controversial, and some of the media didn't like it. But it was a demonstration and a march to support some of the most vulnerable people within our society. In fact, some of the most vulnerable people across the world. It was a march for refugees. And he was basically saying, you're welcome here. Because to be frank, like most of you, I was appalled that when I saw the body of that young child on the beaches of the Mediterranean, washed up as a result of fleeing from oppression and war, but also as a result, I think, of a lack of humanity of some of the states surrounding Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East. Now, again, what I thought was absolutely critical to Jeremy's administration was that he made the point that he would now select a shadow cabinet that was from the left, the right and the centre. So he would bind the whole party together again. And that's what he did. He appointed a whole shadow cabinet. There were some people who refused to serve because, well, I don't know. Some of them refused positions they weren't even offered on the basis of policies they hadn't even seen. I couldn't understand it. But what we said to them is, come back. There's a role for everyone in this movement. Whatever, left, right or centre, you've got a role to play. And that's what we've tried to do since then. Parliamentary Labour Party, the vast bulk of the MPs in Parliament just want to get on with the job of opposing the Tories and bringing about a Labour government. There's a small number who still haven't come to terms with Jeremy's mandate, his leadership, and of course the press will use that to try and sow division. But the vast majority of our members of Parliament and also our members just want to get on with the job of bringing this Tory government down and replacing it with a Labour government. And that's what we're doing, you know. That's what we're doing. In Parliament, we're defeating them all we can. We're fighting back. We fought back and we defeated them on the issue of withdraw the tax credits. We fought back and we defeated them on the issue of the withdraw the benefits for people with disabilities, the PIP. We fought back on the trade union bill, and yes, we gained some significant concessions. We're winning. We're trying to defeat them in the House of Commons as much as we can, but they've got a majority there of 12. So what we're trying to do as well is mobilise in the House of Lords. Now, for the last 30 years, I've been campaigning to abolish the House of Lords. I'm having a rethink at the moment, because not that I want them there who are unelected, or just because Charles II slept with their granny 300 years ago. I want it, if we're going to have a second chamber, I want it to be a democratic one in some form. But we've defeated them in the House of Lords, and as a result of that, delayed their legislation in the Commons, and eventually they've had to come back with some concessions. So we're winning as best we can because we're working together. There are a number of people. Then we had our first round of elections, the local government elections, and some were very, in a very comradely fashion, plotting a coup, as they do in the Labour Party when you're bored. And they were expecting the results of those elections to be pretty disastrous. And if you'd read the media, you would think they were. But actually, we won every mayoral seat we contested. We held on to every council we contested. And we reached the number of council seats at the highest level Ed Miliband at his most popular ever reached. Now that lays the firm foundations for us now to go forward to win elections in each year in the build-up to 2020. Because we're determined that we will win in 2020. But more importantly, if we can secure a general election before then, so much the better. Now, next week, wait for it, you might not like this bit. Next week, we've got the referendum on the euro, on the European Union. Now, as the Labour Party, we've come out on the argument in favour of remain, but to reform. We respect the views of those people who've taken a view that it's better to come out. We respect that. I think you got it wrong, but we respect it. Now, I think what will happen next week, whatever you've seen the polls, it's going to be close either way. Whatever the result, let's be clear, whatever the result, the Labour leadership and the whole of the Labour Party, whatever the result, have got to say to the people of this country, we've heard what you say. Because there's lots of issues out there that are being debated in this European referendum that we've got to acknowledge and take into account. People's concerns about their insecurity at work, The fact that their wages are being undercut sometimes by the importation of migrant labour. The fact that there is public pressure on public services as a result. But let's be very clear about this. Whatever happens in that referendum, we're not going to let the Tories or the bosses use it to divide this movement. We're going to hold together and we're going to tackle the real issues. When it comes to bosses undercutting wages, using whatever labour, wherever it comes from, that's about employment rights. So we need to bring trade union rights back into this country so that everybody's protected and no boss can undercut wages or cut back on employment conditions. That's part of the role of a Labour government. And when it comes to pressure on public services, let's be absolutely clear, the real pressure comes from the austerity measures being introduced by the Tories over the last 7 years that have cut our health services, not built a single council house, and at the same time put pressure on the staff within those services. It is about a Labour government being brought back into power to invest in the NHS, invest in housing, invest in education, and that's what we'll do. And where there are increases in population anywhere, to be frank, we should have the resources then to plough more resources into that area so those public services can be invested into. So the message from next week, whichever side of this debate or argument you're on, whatever the result, is that the Labour and trade union movement will come together again, make sure working people know we've listened to them, and make sure that we then start campaigning against the real people who are destroying our economy. And that's this Tory government, and it's also the bosses that fund them and support them at every election. That's the way in which we will go forward. Let me finally say this to you. In this coming months, and well, if it is up to 2020, they'll throw everything at us, won't they? The whole of the establishment is coming at us all the time. Why do you think that is? It's because we're a threat to them. What we're trying to do is transform our society. What we want, let me make it clear, what's our ambition? Is to create a society that's fairer, that's more equal, that's more democratic, that's prosperous, but that prosperity, that economy that's prosperous should be sustainable economically and environmentally. But also that prosperity should be shared by all. I call that socialism. That's why our movement was founded. Every trade union and those trade unions came together to form the Labour Party, to give it a political voice, to take it into government and to transform our society. Now, I just come back to it. I never ever expected in my life that we'd see again a socialist as the leader of the Labour Party. Well, we've got one now. We've got one. And what we've got to do now is seize that opportunity with both hands. Make sure that we support Jeremy in the campaigns that he's waging, defend him against the media and the establishment that are attacking us on a daily basis, bring into line within our own movement those who are trying to divide us and make sure we're united. And on that basis, we will secure the election of a Labour government that isn't just a Labour government, but it's a socialist government achieving that society we want. What I said last year, and I'll close on this as I did last year, 3 things we always need. Determination, absolute determination. No matter what they throw at us, you stand firm. Courage. Sometimes we have to swim against the stream. You've done that. You've done that in every dispute. We've got heroes like Kumaran who stood against the stream. Courage like that is needed. But above all else, as I said last year, above all else, what do we need? It's the thing we discovered a century and a half ago when our movement was founded. That together we're strong. Injury to one is an injury to all. We put it on our banners. Unity is strength. It is that secret we discovered. It's solidarity. What we need is solidarity. So I I just give you this commitment from Jeremy and myself. We'll give you that determination, and with you, we'll show you that courage. But above all else, we'll be with you in every dispute, in every campaign, and as we go into government, in solidarity. Solidarity, brothers and sisters.